Hello, and welcome back to Digital Hustle Career Pathway 101, the podcast where we dive into honest, real world conversations about what it takes to thrive in digital careers. I'm Shamima, and with me today is my wonderful co host and partner in conversation, Shahida.
Hi, everyone.
In today's episode, digital marketing gets real. We are getting into the real world side of learning and careers, and it's a conversation worth tuning in for. Shahida, you and I have talked so many times about how powerful learning becomes when it actually connects to the real world.
Indeed, I believe education has to go beyond just theory. And that's exactly what we're talking about experiential learning, what it means, how it's changing the way we teach and learn, and why it's especially powerful in digital marketing. This is such a relevant topic, and I think a lot of our listeners, whether they're educators, students, or even industry professionals, will really connect with today's episode.
What's really exciting is that the research backs this up. A recent study from National Association of Colleges and Employers, known as NAS, shows that experiential learning isn't just helpful, it's one of the smartest investments a student can make. And we are not just talking about landing that first job after graduation.
Exactly. This study followed early career professionals, people just 1 to 3 years into their careers, and the results were phenomenal.
They found that those who took part in experiential learning are earning on average $15,000 more per year than their peers who didn't. And this salary boost isn't limited to just one field. It holds up across 4 out of 5 major industries such as finance, manufacturing, science, and education. That's huge.
It really is. And it's not just about salary. These professionals advance faster, build stronger networks, and are more likely to have mentors early in their careers.
And here's something that really stuck with me. Those who did experiential learning are far more likely to see their education as relevant to their current job. The study showed that 71% felt that connection compared to just 56% of students who didn't have those real world learning experiences.
That kind of connection can completely shift how someone sees the value of their education. It's no surprise, experiential learners feel more confident about paying off student debt, they're earning more, and have a clearer path ahead.
Totally. And that's why we are excited for today's guest, someone who's dedicated his career to creating those meaningful, real world connections for students. We are thrilled to welcome Dan Lonergan, manager of experiential learning at Seneca Polytechnic. Dan's also led innovative work at Brock University and helped shape work integrated learning nationally with CEWIL Canada, where he even hosted a podcast called Into the Wilderness. Dan brings a wealth of experience in partnership development, student advising, and building programs that connect the classroom to the world beyond it. Dan, welcome. We are glad you are here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
Let's begin with the foundation. You have spent more than a decade working in this space. In your own words, how do you define experiential learning and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, off the rip, I'd just like to say, you're preaching to the choir here in terms of digging into the evidence by NACE and everything you shared in that opening. Completely agree with all of those facts. And I think people that have been in this space and who are practitioners in it, whether you're like a faculty member leveraging this type of teaching and learning in your class or somebody maybe who's working more on the administrative side like myself, you see it kind of all come together. At the core of it, again, depending on how much you want to dive into the theory behind experiential learning, going back to like Kolb and those learning cycles, it's learning by doing. That's always like the simplest way that I like to refer to it. And a lot of people do it that way. But it's taking what you're learning in whatever context that might be. And I know we're going to dive into digital marketing here today, but really it can apply to essentially any discipline or any program, any course. There might be a few where, I could have a conversation. Maybe it's not the best suited for certain subjects, but that's okay. And taking that and applying it to something real. And there's different levels of that. It can be very, very intensive. So you think of some of the more robust forms of experiential learning, like a work term or a co-op placement where a student is fully immersed in that environment, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 for multiple weeks. You build on skills and competencies to a certain degree that way. But it can be much, much smaller than that. It can exist within a classroom. It can exist in an isolated experience, maybe just for one particular class for an hour or two. And there's so many different ways that you can leverage experiential learning in ways that it kind of plays itself out in the classroom.
So from an instructor's point of view, is there any benefit for the instructors there?
I like to think there is. And I think for folks that have, chosen to go down this path as professors, as instructors, they come to realize that, and it might not happen immediately. It might take a couple of rounds of it. But whenever I'm having conversations with educators or faculty members about integrating experiential learning, I always like to understand, well, where are they coming from? What do you do currently, right? What do you teach? How do you structure your course? What's the breakdown? What do you get your students doing? And then when we get into the weeds on experiential learning, okay, why might you be interested? Why would you want to incorporate something? And then we can get into, okay, well, what would it actually be? For a lot of folks that I've worked with over the years, it's allowing them to then see what their students can do with the content that they're teaching them, instead of just spitting that back out on a test, or tackling a case study. And don't get me wrong, very effective methods of assessment and learning, and they each have their own place, I think, in the larger ecosystem. But if you want to then see how they take it and apply it to something maybe a bit more real, more timely, if we are going to involve an external partner, okay, now there's an outcome where somebody is really counting on the work that the students are doing. So they have that investment in it as well. And I frame it to educators, you almost have to shift from the mindset of being a deliverer of a lecture and being more of a coach for your students. Because for a lot of them, if they've never done this before, it's uncomfortable. And you have to balance that off. You can't just deliver the content in exactly the same way as maybe you're used to. You have to then think, okay, how do I help them apply it to whatever that experiential component is, so that they're constantly reflecting on it. We can get back into the reflection maybe later on. But if you just treat it as a transactional type thing, you lose something in that. So it's really kind of reframing their mindset of how they teach, how they approach maybe their teaching philosophy, how they work with their students. And it's a mindset change for the students as well. But end of the day, I think it's then letting those educators see how deeply the students can connect that material to maybe something that they want to do when they're done in their program. So I think for folks that are passionate about helping their students figure out what's next, experiential learning is a great tool to let them do that.
So have you ever experienced, when you were introducing this idea with instructors, a pushback?
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
how did you tackle that?
I don't know if it's just been like the position that I've been in, where I've been fortunate enough where I've never had to force it. And I don't think anyone should, right? I think it's a very popular thing. And I think over the last decade, it's grown in its popularity, whether it's with government or in the media, where it has taken on a bit of a buzzword type of vibe. And I know especially during COVID and things like that, it became kind of the thing to do because we couldn't do some of the things that we were typically having students do. I've never believed in forcing it onto somebody. If we're having a conversation, like, Dan, it's not something that I see fitting into my course, that's fine. Right. And I've said there's certain courses and maybe programs where it doesn't make the most sense. Like my undergrad's in mathematics. I could not see some of this playing out in like a differential equations course. It just doesn't jive the same way it would in something like digital marketing. I remember working with a faculty member in a first year stats course. And back to I did a stint in academic advising early on in my career. It's kind of how I got into post-secondary. I was getting a lot of first year students in this class saying like, why do I have to be in a stats course? I'm never going to use it. It's boring. The typical, and these weren't math students. These were students from any program taking it as a context credit. And so then we had a conversation with the little group that controlled the content in that course and said, well, what if instead of like the perfectly curated question out of the textbook that has, an R score of 0.95 and the correlation is great, what if we gave them real data from a company or a partner? And it was messy and the answer didn't jump off the page and it didn't make sense until you thought about it. So we did that. So there are definitely cases where it can play out and we have that little, again, that was a pretty basic case that we built out, and we had the company come in and talk to them about how stats shows up every single day. It doesn't matter if you work in a marketing role or in a lab or in like at the front desk, right? Like there's numbers pop up
all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm a math hater, so you can't convince me.
Hey, I'll try.
Okay, so I imagine that shift also affects the way instructors design and approach their teaching. What kinds of changes have you seen in teaching strategies when educators move toward more experiential models?
Well, I think, like I said previously, it's reframing how you view yourself as an educator at the front of the class, and that you do need to take on a bit more of a coaching approach with your students. A lot of times, experiential learning can present itself in the form of group work. So now that's a different level of coaching that you have to bring to your students, right? How do you then help them work together with students maybe they don't know? And everybody has horror stories about group work, and it can turn people off completely of even doing this type of learning and teaching. But there's ways around it. There's strategies that you can do and you can implement with your students. So that's one. Sometimes it reinvigorates their own passion for the subject that they're teaching, because it lets them then start applying it differently. And instead of, okay, I'm going to hit all the main points I want them to know, and then I want them to, send that back to me on a test. This keeps it new, because especially if you're working with external partners to some degree, that's going to change every time, right? The needs of that partner will be different than the last project you did with your students. So it keeps you on your toes a little bit as an educator, and if you have a desire to keep in touch with industry and the world that your research or your own passion lives with, now you're getting that kind of energy from the partners that you work with too. So you can get it on both sides, I think, as an educator, from what you see in your students, but then also what you get to do with the partners and clients that you work with.
Awesome.
So diving a little bit deeper into digital marketing, right? So the tools are always changing, the trends are always changing. So how do you think that instructors can stay up to date by implementing experiential learning?
I mean, yeah, obviously digital marketing in terms of the way it presents itself now versus 10, 15, 20 years ago is very, very different. I'll preface with saying, like, I am not a digital marketer. That is not, I've taken some marketing courses, but
How did you feel about them?
I enjoyed them. I did them. And
was there experiential learning involved or no?
there was. So interestingly enough, one of the biggest things I remember from my marketing course that I took while doing my MBA was the way it was structured. It was case-based, so we didn't work necessarily with live clients, but the way that the professor taught it was really to drive decision-making. So every single week, we would have a case / like an activity that we had to do. And so he would teach for about an hour, concept, whatever it was for that particular week. And then in a small group that we would operate with for the entire term, it was 3 or 4 of us. We would then have the remaining 2 hours of class to go and do the case and deliver it before that class time was up. So
time crunch.
Yeah, and there was often like parameters around, if you were going to submit a slide deck, it could be as long as you wanted, but the implementation and like recommendation part of had to be at least half of your slides. No. So then you really had to think, well, there's no point in me adding all of this extra fluff and build up and intro, because I'm going to add that many more slides about implementation, which was the crux of what he wanted. So we learned to make decisions really, really quickly, but well-informed, and you really had to determine what's important here and how do I get my message across. But I mean, you look at now like the emergence of online digital marketing, driving businesses and services. And essentially, if you're trying to make it as a business in 2025 and you don't have a handle on digital marketing, in my opinion, you're a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of, maybe there's a few industries where it might not apply, but not everybody has a background in that. So there's a lot of noise online. If you're trying to educate yourself on how to do this, you can go down the wrong path. You can spend a lot of money on things. You think about like search engine optimization and keywords and website design. It's known that people don't have an expertise in this, and there's an opportunity to profit from that. And so where can we make sure that our students who are going through these programs understand these tools, how to leverage the skills that we want them to take away from programs, and then do something with it? So I've seen the growth in a lot of experiential projects in this particular area because of how prominent it is in the business environment.
So would you say that instructors can benefit or stay up to date via implementation of experiential learning because they're also learning at the same time?
I like to think so, right? I think, again, to the point I made about it's always new, is because, okay, you're going to work with a client maybe for 3 months in a term with your students, and then maybe not the next term, but probably over the course of a year, especially in this space, things are going to change, right? There's going to be new tech. AI continues to grow, and how are we leveraging that when it comes to digital marketing? What are the tools at our disposal 12 months from now versus today? So that's going to force them to stay on top of things. And again, the concepts and the theory probably aren't changing as rapidly, but how you then teach your students to apply them may. So I think that keeps the educators engaged and constantly thinking, okay, what am I going to tweak the next time I do this versus how it went the last time?
Totally agreed. That brings us to the heart of this episode. Why is experiential learning particularly powerful when it comes to digital marketing education?
Well, I think kind of the point I made was it forces students to go beyond just learning the concept or concepts that make up digital marketing, and add that level of realism to it. Because yes, it's one of those things where if you had unlimited money and unlimited technical expertise, and you had someone on your staff that had a degree in whatever form of digital marketing that you're after, you probably aren't asking the question, what do I do? But the average small business, nonprofit, they don't have that person on staff. They don't have an unlimited budget. And they're often, whatever they read online, they might try, or they're paying somebody probably more than they should be because they don't know how to do it themselves. And that's what it is. So that's where it's like, you're teaching your students how to take that factor and those kind of barriers and now apply the theory. Right? Because now it's harder. It's more, not harder, but it's more challenging because you actually have to stop and think, yes, this is how you should apply the concept. But if you can't afford to do it that way, then you have to.
If it's not practical.
Yeah. How do you adjust? Right? How do you tell somebody if you're a student and you're kind of presenting this to a client, how do you tell them that in a way that's professional, and you're not, you're not looking to put them down because they don't have an unlimited bankroll at their company to do it, which most don't? Then you have to really be strategic, and it teaches you to think differently. So again, in this particular context, I think that's where it's most impactful, because it really does make students pause, or it should. And I think if it's being presented the right way in the classroom, and again, you're coaching students about how to do this type of learning, you should be encouraging them to pause and really think, okay, I know what I would do if money was no object and I had unlimited staff and resources, but I know my client doesn't have that.
Yeah.
So what do I do? Right? And that's where the learning takes place, because that's likely, some students may walk into a multinational corporation, big marketing departments and have all tools and have setups, even like the one that we're at today. Others won't. And if you give all the students differing opportunities while they're in their program, then you equip them to be successful when they walk into a small business or they do get a job out the gate after graduation, maybe with a nonprofit, because there's a huge need for this skill set. But then you got to learn, how do I play within the confines that come with it?
That's amazing. That is one of the most difficult tasks, honestly.
Exactly.
To work with the resources you have and
Yeah.
to make the best out of it. That is the real challenge. So we have kind of proposed this idea of experiential learning. I think if I was an instructor, I would be, okay, you know what? Maybe I can implement this. I'll use the word convinced again. I'm convinced. So if you had to speak to the students may be like, why do I need to do this in class? So if you had to speak specifically to the students, can you highlight the benefits quickly for them so they can be more open to this learning?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done this countless of times. And I think, people that are operating in kind of this space as practitioners, the roles might not always be student facing, but I think we've all often found ourselves in front of students explaining to them, like, why should you care about this today? My go-to, especially in any business related program or course or topic like digital marketing, the easiest way, or the message that I've always tried to give to students is this opportunity, this experience is going to help you do one of two things. It's either going to confirm, reaffirm, assure you that you are in the right spot, and this is the type of work that you are passionate about and you can see yourself doing regardless of the situation you find yourself in, or it's going to do the opposite. It's going to tell you, like, you know what?
No, this ain't it.
Not for me. And that's okay. And I think we need to be okay with that being okay. And if this type of teaching and learning helps a student realize maybe this isn't actually what I thought it was, while they still have the opportunity to change, then we're doing our job. And I think even as educators, you're doing your job. Like your entire class in front of you is not going to be as passionate, maybe as you, as each other, and some may not end up going into that field at all. And if this helps them realize that, then it's a check mark for me.
Dan, could you share a story of example of a student project that had a meaningful impact on the student, on a business, or even a community?
Yeah, I mean, I can stay in the digital marketing space, and I've mentioned a couple of times we were running a project at Brock University that started up before 2020, but in the area of search engine optimization and ad campaigns. And the faculty member had taught the course a number of times and had kind of a very good structure already built of how he liked to convey those theories and strategies to students. And then we started opening up the door for partners and small businesses to come in and let the students apply that to their actual real living SEO campaigns. And so the caveat was, this was one of the only projects where there was, oftentimes there's no like money associated with these projects. There's no cost, there's no fees, but to run an ad campaign, you have to put money behind it. So we worked with clients. We did some networking and business development to say, okay, would you be open to putting 100, 200, 300? What would be comfortable for you to put into your own account? And then our students are going to manage it for 2 weeks based on what they're learning. What that faculty member was then able to realize in his students' learning by being able to actually apply it to something real for a limited amount of time was monumental for him, for his students, for the clients. That like it became one of the most popular projects that we would run on a term-by-term basis. It was nominated for Teaching and Innovation Awards and won numerous times, both in Canada and kind of in North America. So it became this kind of revolutionary form of a project for the faculty member that was teaching it, reinvigorated his passion behind teaching that course. And it became a staple. Like we had a line of clients every single term because, locally it was small in the Niagara community. And so word started to spread and people knew what it was. But it was because it was so real, because there was results that you could take. Okay, we weren't doing this thing as a small business, and then we did it for 2 weeks. We spent X number of dollars, and here's our ROI. And it was just so tangible to see, 9 times out of 10, it was positively impactful. And they saw that return. Okay, and now they're thinking, how do I sustain this? Okay, the students have told me what I need to do. I've gotten like that little bit of coaching as a client. Okay, now I have to take that and decide, do I keep doing this? Can I justify a larger budget behind it? What is it? And what do I do next with that? So that became, very, very popular because of the results that the students were able to drive and show to all the partners that we worked with.
That's phenomenal. I love this idea.
It is. So it seems like collaboration and mentorship are some of the key parts of this process. I would like to ask, how do you and your team support instructors in doing this kind of work effectively?
Yeah, I think, and I can speak for the team that I've got at Seneca Polytechnic, in the sense of the role really is to help alleviate some of the side of the desk pieces that faculty members who work with external partners often deal with. And like, don't get me wrong, it's extra work. And even in those initial conversations about experiential learning, oftentimes if there's going to be a hesitation, one of those hesitations is, how much extra work is this for me as a professor, as an educator? And it is, especially if you've never done it before. You have to think about structuring your course differently, designing it slightly differently. And that's where I think, like, both the team that I have at Seneca and I think experiential practitioners across the country, it's really about helping with some of those pieces. So whether it's talking through your course, and like I said at the beginning, how do you want to change it, right? What elements of that do we maybe tweak or take out? And then we're going to add in this larger project. Then it evolves into, okay, you want to work with external clients. How many? Do you want your students to do this in pairs or in larger teams? So we talk through that. Then becomes the sourcing of these partners. Now, certain faculty members, certain educators have a network that they've been tapped into because they've worked in that. They want to bring in those folks. Amazing. If they're not, then it's, how can we help find you partners? Do you care where they are? Do you want them to be local? Do you want them to be nonprofit organizations? And we kind of cater then to the desires and needs of the educator and work with them. Then comes like the vetting of, is the partner that says they want this help or need this help, are they in it for the right reasons? Are they willing to kind of, be available to meet with students and to answer emails and to come to campus and the whole experience? Now, whether this is like a one-off on a random Tuesday afternoon and it's a one and done, or this is something that's going to stretch 10 weeks, that's a different conversation. And so I think experiential learning practitioners fill that gap and handle those types of pieces, setting up meetings, making sure that things are on track, and, final presentations are thought of 3 months before they need to happen, and not, can you come on campus next week? Probably too late.
There are multiple stages.
Big time.
So, of course, you need to factor that in and understand that if it's practical or not, if it's going to go further or if it's going to stop midway. So I can understand how that can be an issue and how you guys are helping them out in understanding those impediments that may occur.
Yeah, and I think then the piece of, if you want to go back to like experiential learning pedagogy and theory, is then the topic of reflection. And how are we incorporating that? No matter what the experience is, what the students are doing, are we incorporating the opportunity for students to reflect? How, when, how often? And there's multiple ways that you can do that. It does not by any means need to be, write me 2 paragraphs on this experience, which becomes a book report typically for students, and they regurgitate, well, we did this and we did that. It's like, that's... You're just telling me what you did. That's not reflection. So then we have those conversations and try to, offer tools, even something like doing a voice recording or a podcast about your experience. And it's a one-off. Maybe it's not a recurring type of show, but that's a great way for students to get their thoughts out about what they did. So when we have those types of conversations with educators too.
It's very engaging.
Yeah. So how have you seen experiential learning boost students' confidence, creativity, and overall readiness for the workforce?
Well, I think like you said off the beginning, right? Like, it has proven that it sets students up for greater early success. So whether that's, walking out the door with multiple experiences, and this applies to all students. So whether or not you've had something as intensive as like a 14-week co-op, that's great in and of itself. If you're then adding that you've done, a digital marketing campaign strategy for a local business, you've also done a course that has creative advertising, you've done another project around search engine optimization, you now have so many opportunities that you can speak to as a new grad or a soon-to-be grad in an interview. And oftentimes, students might not put two and two together that these types of experiences can show up on a resume. They can show up on a LinkedIn page in a way. And so we have a duty of educating students on how to do that. And that helps boost the confidence to then have something to talk about if they don't have work experience. And then I think it boosts on, people often refer to them as soft skills. I don't personally care for that way of framing. I view them more as like professional skills, but things like communication, working as part of a team.
Professionalism as well.
Yeah, just in a general sense of the word, that this type of teaching and learning push those human skills. And I know, again, at Seneca, strong focus on human skills, so collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. You could challenge me on pretty much any type of experiential learning that doesn't hit on all three of those, and I'd show you a way that it does. And I think that's really where, like, you can be the most technical course and you can hit on all the theory, but it's also going to build those skills in your students if they are doing things like, delivering presentations that aren't just to you, the educator, they're delivering it to a board of directors. It's a different environment, right? It's a very different presentation. They have to think differently, and it teaches them different skills that they can then use down the road.
And I think that is a great way to build a portfolio, even those coming from the different background, not having anything they have done before in digital marketing or any other field, they still can have that opportunity to start from the scratch and then showcase their work to the employers and clients.
That's true. We have been talking about experiential learning and how it helps students, instructors, and how it's overall a very nurturing way of teaching and also learning. So for the institutions or for the instructors who are still not on board, but they're thinking about it, so what advice would you give them for them to start? Where do they start?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's something where institutions will find their way to this in their own time and in their own way. And I mean,
even through this podcast, maybe.
Hey, I hope so. Right. And that's why I think talking about it helps, because it can dispel some of the misconceptions or myths that go behind it, or bring them to light, right? In the sense, like I said, like, this does take a little bit of work. And from an institutional side, it does also take an investment. And so again, like, super fortunate to be at Seneca Polytechnic, where there has been the decision to make this investment in the form of people and a team to help build this, to help grow it organically. And I will strongly say I believe this should grow organically. I don't think it should ever be something where it's forced to a point of, well, we have to do, X amount of it. I think naturally you will get to the point where the majority of your programs will do this just in their own time and in their own way. And I think the more flexible you are with recognizing different forms of experiential learning, help different programs find themselves in it. And so it's not a prescribed method of, well, there's kind of like these one of two ways of doing EL and that's it. Not the case. I think if you can have some people or guidance that in the form of support to educators and faculty, that helps move the needle a little bit and maybe move things along quicker than if folks are trying to do this themselves in kind of like little silos or pockets. I've been fortunate enough to be at two institutions where, the decision was made to offer this as a service more centrally and provide that out to all programs, all faculty, and then let that take its time to evolve and see, okay, who's going to come to this immediately because they themselves have been practicing this way, and now they finally have somebody to just bounce ideas off of. And then there's others that start hearing about their colleagues doing this, and they've thought about it, but maybe they've hesitated for whatever reason, but now they know someone who's doing it, and they know there's some support, they know there's some help, somebody to talk to, and that helps, get them over that hump or wherever they were kind of maybe stuck. And that's why I think talking about it can help, because you can then start talking through different examples, different things you'd want to do with your students, different forms of assessment and evaluation, and then you find what's right for you. Yeah.
And I think that it also can enhance the awareness, readiness among like the
Mm-hmm.
instructors and the learners.
Maybe there should be a community, an online community out there,
Yeah.
because a lot of the times, if you don't have people implementing this around you, maybe you
Mm-hmm.
can join an online community.
Credit to CEWIL Canada, so Cooperative Education, Work Integrated Learning Canada acronym, CEWIL. Historically, they focused primarily on cooperative education, so they used to have a different name, and then in 2017 kind of rebranded and reimagined themselves to be more inclusive of other forms of work integrated learning, things like internships, practicums, clinicals, field placements, co-op still, service learning, community projects. Now these are still all forms of work integrated learning. Now there's forms of experiential learning that don't involve third parties, they don't involve clients. So they've had to focus a little bit, but still it's allowed for a broader network of practitioners, educators included, to now find commonalities and find peers in that national network. So I think, I mean, if you're Canadian and listening to this, CEWIL is the leading voice from a work integrated learning perspective in the country. You reference NACE, which obviously is global, huge network that folks can get incorporated with. If you're in North America, predominantly the States, but also Canada, the Society of Experiential Education is a good network to put on your radar. Again, that maybe is a bit more true to some of the other forms of experiential education, experiential learning, even right down to just like field trips with your students and how do you get the most out of those types of opportunities, obviously where they're possible. But there's a number of different groups that folks can get associated with or join, even just to build a network of like-minded professionals, practitioners, forum boards, right? Asking questions, getting involved with people who are kind of keen about the same things that you are.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities we can see. So I know partnerships with industry play a big role too. How do those relationships enhance the experience, not just for students, but for faculty as well?
Yeah, I think if we are talking about one of the forms of work integrated learning, it's critical, right? Like it doesn't happen without that partner. You know, I've always referred, it's like a kind of a triangle or a trifecta of, you've got the educator, the faculty member, you have the student, and then you have the partner, and the three of those make up the experience. If any one of them kind of falls off, it all falls apart. They are just as much a player in that relationship as the person, you know, educating the students and the students themselves. There's a difference between, you know, being a supervisor of a student on a co-op or who's in a clinical placement versus being someone's boss, right? You like, they are still a student. They are learning, much like if they're working in a class, the expectations have to be set very clear, and they do have to provide some guidance to the students as well, again, depending on the intensity of that relationship, but it always plays a factor. And I think if the willingness to do that and the openness is there, then I'd say, you know, almost every time it works out positively. They're students, they're learning. Everybody is going to learn at a different pace and then present that back in a different way. So as long as that's commonly understood, I've always been a big believer of getting that out in the open early on in these conversations. Again, something where I think practitioners in this space, we're very comfortable having those conversations. If you're not as a faculty member and educated, that's okay. Like, let us handle that and just be very frank of hey, here's how this will typically play out. And then you kind of over time you come to learn, you get to the point where you can kind of pretty quickly identify, like, is this going to be the right partner fit for this course, for these students in general? And then you work with them, right? Because oftentimes too, if this is the first time they've ever supervised a student or worked with a class, you have to coach them too. Yeah.
Dan, thank you so much for such a thoughtful conversation. Your work shows just how transformative education can be when it's rooted in experience and connection.
Thank you for making the time to come to the studio and talk to us. I'm pretty sure that the listeners did find this insightful and they're walking away with some understanding of real world learning and a lot of appreciation for it as well.
And to all of you tuning in, thank you for being part of this journey with us on Digital Hustle Career Pathway 101. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love it if you shared it, left us a review, or subscribed for more conversations like this.
We'll be back soon with more insight to help you grow your digital career, whether you're teaching, learning, or leading change. Until next time, keep hustling and keep chasing those digital dreams. Bye, guys.